Welcome to the So That's Why podcast, where we unpack the science behind everyday questions. I'm Jen.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Matt.
Right, today we're asking something that probably affects how you shop, cook, and even stress about what you eat. Why do people think everyday ingredients are dangerous? We've all seen it, someone flipping over a packet, squinting at the label and declaring, I can't even pronounce half of these.
Yeah, I know that person because I am that person. I'm the guy that stands in the supermarket aisle for 10 minutes trying to decide if ingredients like sodium benzoate is going to be my downfall while simultaneously ignoring the fact that I'm buying a sharing size bag of crisps, which I have no intention of sharing.
I'm sure you'd share a little bit.
Yeah, no.
The interesting thing is that you could hand someone a list of chemicals, so ascorbic acid, sodium chloride, dihydrogen monoxide, and they'd probably want to avoid all of them. But if you looked at it another way, ascorbic acid is vitamin C, sodium chloride is table salt, and dihydrogen monoxide is just another description for water.
What's fascinating is this fear is actually growing, it's not shrinking. Recent surveys show that 67% of consumers don't like foods containing ingredients they don't recognise. In the UK alone, 19 million adults now actively avoid ultra-processed foods. That's a 15% jump from the previous year.
And what's behind this is known as chemophobia. So it's defined as an irrational fear or aversion to chemicals. And the irony is that everything's made of chemicals, so water, oxygen, even your own body. So this idea of chemical-free is completely impossible. And the word chemical has become almost synonymous with dangerous in everyday languages.
That's so true. It's so true. We're all walking around, I guess, like we're afraid of everything, aren't we? Including ourselves then, I guess, if by your chemical definition. Is that comforting? I don't know. I think it's probably deeply unsettling in many ways.
And what drives this is something with a name called the appeal to nature fallacy. And this deeply held belief that natural equals safe and synthetic equals harmful. But that's not how chemistry works.
Exactly right. And we can look at it this way. So arsenic is natural. Cyanide is natural. Botulinum toxin, one of the most lethal substances known, is completely natural and potentially deadly. Meanwhile, synthetic vitamin C made in a laboratory is molecularly identical to vitamin C from an orange. Your body literally cannot tell the difference.
So my body then doesn't care whether my vitamins grow on a tree or were made by someone in a lab coat. It's just looking at the molecular structure.
Exactly. From a scientific perspective, that is exactly right.
So let's look at what people are actually worried about. Research from the German Federal Institute for Risk Assessment found 84% of respondents avoid flavour enhancers, 69% avoid sweeteners, and 64% avoid food dyes. These are huge numbers.
They really are. And unless you're Uncle Roger, I suppose MSG is going to be on top of that list, isn't it? Because I remember that whole thing that MSG, is basically a poison. Been told that ever since I was a kid.
Yeah, and MSG, it's monosodium glutamate. It's a perfect example of fear outlasting evidence. So the whole panic actually started when a doctor wrote a letter, not a study, he just wrote a letter to a medical journal claiming that he felt unwell after eating Chinese food. And from that single anecdote back in the late 1960s, decades of fear were born.
What's remarkable is how thoroughly this has been debunked since. Multiple well-designed double-blind studies have consistently failed to trigger reactions in people who claim MSG sensitivity when it's consumed with food. The FDA and the European Food Safety Authority and global regulatory bodies all classify MSG as generally safe.
Which is good news, but it means for the last... Well, I'm not going to go into how long, but a while I've been sort of thinking about my takeaways with a little bit of, all based on one man's letter about feeling a bit off. Meanwhile, glutamate, though, occurs naturally, doesn't it, in things like tomatoes, mushrooms, Parmesan cheese, all the foods that I would consider healthy and sophisticated.
And breast milk glutamate is naturally present in breast milk.
And if we look at what happened with MSG, it's a pattern that we see repeatedly. So a single poorly evidenced claim gets amplified, creates this cultural fear, and then it persists long after the science has moved on. In another podcast we've done, we talk about maltodextrin, carrageenan, and other similar harmless compounds that get talked down through irrelevant data and kind of scaremongering.
I mentioned artificial sweeteners before, but they present a more nuanced picture. While regulatory agencies maintain they're safe within acceptable daily intake limits, some recent large-scale studies, they've raised legitimate concerns worth monitoring.
Yeah, and one such study was a French cohort study of over 100,000 adults, and it found associations between artificial sweetener consumption and slightly increased cardiovascular disease risk. But it's really important to note that these are observational associations. They're not proven causal links, and the absolute risk increases were small.
So sweeteners then are more of a sort of keep your eye on the research rather than panic immediately.
Absolutely, and that's a sensible way to look at it. So the key is always proportionality, understanding the difference between a potential area of ongoing research and a confirmed danger. And that's the approach that everyone should take, but unfortunately, the internet takes over and doesn't take that approach at all.
So food dyes are actually an area where consumer concerns align more closely with scientific evidence. So red 40, yellow 5 and yellow 6 have been found to contain trace contaminants, and some studies support links between certain dyes and hyperactivity in children.
Yeah, that's right. And this is why the European Union requires warning labels on products containing certain dyes. And California recently banned red 40 in school foods. But the thing is, different regulators are taking different approaches based on the same evidence, which understandably causes consumer confusion.
Well, it does for me because, sometimes the fear is justified, sometimes it's overblown, sometimes it's somewhere in between. And this is why nutrition is actually quite confusing for me. And I really want sort of simple rules. But the science just sort of seems to keep saying, well, Matt, it sort of really depends, really.
Yeah, and the fundamental principle of it being the dose that makes the poison helps, or it should help, to cut through that confusion. But any substance, even water, can be harmful when consumed in excessive amounts, while many substances considered dangerous are perfectly safe in low quantities.
This is how regulatory agencies establish safety, isn't it? They identify the highest dose at which no adverse effects occur in studies. Then they divide it by 100 to create a massive safety margin. The acceptable daily intake already accounts for being extra cautious.
So when I read then the scary headlines about some ingredient, the amount being studied is probably, wildly different from what's actually in my food.
Yeah, absolutely, almost always. And if you take caffeine, for example, so the lethal dose of caffeine is just under 200 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So if you take a 160-pound person, that's about 72 to 73 kilograms. That would be well over 100 cups of coffee. And with that amount, you're more likely to have problems with water poisoning than before the caffeine issues kick in.
Wow.
I'm safe then, I only drink 90.
99.
Yeah.
Well, this is why occasionally exceeding guidelines on a given day isn't cause for alarm. These limits are designed around a lifetime exposure, not single occasions.
So speaking then of things that people worry unnecessarily about, can I ask you guys about seed oils? Like my social media feed, man, is just full of people claiming they're toxic and inflammatory.
Yes, seed oils are a textbook case of misinformation spreading despite solid evidence to the contrary. So critics claim the omega-6 fatty acids cause inflammation, but multiple systemic reviews of randomized controlled trials have found virtually no evidence for this.
So a 2017 meta-analysis actually found that in many studies, participants consuming the most linoleic acid, like the main omega-6 in seed oils, had the lowest levels of inflammation. The American Heart Foundation and the British Heart Foundation both maintain seed oils are actually healthy when used to replace saturated fats.
So I can stop feeling guilty about my rapeseed oil, which is genuinely good news because I was running out of things to actually cook with, that I'm allowed to cook with.
What's particularly telling is that many of the loudest voices against seed oils are influencers with no scientific training.
What a surprise.
Yeah, while actual nutrition researchers and cardiologists aren't worried. The claims spread because they sound plausible and they tap into the broader fear of processed anything.
That's it. And no surprises at all, but marketing has capitalised heavily on these fears. So products claiming to be chemical free, which is literally impossible, or clean, which has no regulated definition, they command premium prices. And entire product categories have emerged based on exploiting chemophobia rather than genuine safety concerns. I mean, I've seen clean beauty and clean label aisles in retailers, which are just absolute nonsense.
What's interesting is why this resonates so strongly. I mean, research suggests it connects to broader mistrust, corporate scandals involving everything from pesticides to pharmaceuticals. They've created a legitimate skepticism about industry claims. And that reasonable concern then morphs into a blanket rejection of anything that sounds scientific.
So the good news is we're not being irrational. We've just been burned before, and now we're suspicious of anything with a long, complicated sounding name.
Yeah.
Right?
That's it. And there is logic to it. So even if the application sometimes misses the mark, the challenge is distinguishing between healthy skepticism and unfounded fear driven by people and companies with agendas. So the notions that natural means safer, or if you can't pronounce the chemical, can't be good for you, it's nonsense. They're both nonsense. So if there's one good thing that's come from clean beauty and clean label retail trends, it's this driving of demand for transparency, albeit with a fair amount of nonsense thrown in.
One genuinely concerning trend is that people focused on avoiding specific additives sometimes overlook real food safety risks. Studies show that individuals who fear chemical additives often practice risky behaviours like improper storage or ignoring use-by dates, things that can actually cause illness.
So while I'm worrying then about whether some additive I can't pronounce is going to be my downfall, I'm leaving food out on the counter way too long, which is going to be a spectacular own goal, isn't it?
Yeah, I've seen your team score a few own goals. But no, you're right. And the bigger picture matters more than individual ingredients. And extensive research links ultra-processed food consumption to various adverse health outcomes. But this likely stems from the overall dietary patterns rather than specific additives. So high calories, high sugar, high salt, low fibre, low vitamins. These patterns matter more than any individual single ingredient.
And this connects to what we know about healthy eating generally, focusing on whole foods, fruits, vegetables, and minimally processed items, while limiting calorie-dense, nutrient-poor foods. You know, that approach works regardless of your position on specific additives.
Yeah, so rather than obsessing over individual ingredients I can't pronounce, what you're saying is I should zoom out, and look at my overall diet, right?
That's it. It's the evidence-based approach. So the forest matters more than any individual tree.
And it's worth remembering that our regulatory systems, while imperfect, do provide genuine protection. The safety margins built into acceptable daily intakes are specifically designed to be conservative. So when agencies say something is safe at a certain level, they've already factored in extra caution.
Which is actually quite reassuring, isn't it? Like I'd assume them food regulations are not being written by the same people who approved asbestos in the 1950s these days.
No, it's fair to say regulatory science has come quite a long way since then. So these days, before any additive is approved, it undergoes extensive testing across multiple exposure scenarios.
You know, what strikes me is how this connects to everything else we've discussed on this podcast. Just like with sleep, hydration and exercise, the fundamentals matter most, and perfectionism often gets in the way of good enough.
That's it, because the human body is remarkably resilient. It has sophisticated systems for processing and eliminating things it doesn't need. So occasional exposure to substances within established safety limits isn't the threat our anxiety suggests it's going to be.
Which is actually good, isn't it? And I suppose the reassuring takeaway in this is our bodies just aren't these fragile glass ornaments that sort of shatter if we encounter something with more than two syllables, right?
No, that's it. And your body is more like a highly efficient processing plant. It sounds a bit weird. But, it's basically dealt with far worse than an additive with a complicated name.
I mean, your liver alone processes thousands of compounds daily, and that's literally what your liver's built to do.
So my body then has been quietly handling business this whole time, maybe while I've been over-obsessing and panicking about ingredients lists. That sounds about right, doesn't it, I suppose?
So to bring this together, why do people think everyday ingredients are dangerous?
It's because we've conflated chemical with dangerous, despite everything being chemicals, because we're tuned to assume natural automatically means safer, because legitimate corporate scandals have created generalised distrust, and because marketing has learned to profit from our fears.
That's unlike marketing, isn't it, really? Very unlike marketing. Yeah, okay, so we're not being stupid for being worried. We're just applying reasonable caution to wrong targets while potentially ignoring things that actually matter, like whether I'm eating vegetables and not leaving the mayo out in the sun.
So the key is proportionality. Some concerns have scientific backing, many don't. And understanding the dose that makes the poison principle helps, and it helps us distinguish between real risks and amplified fears.
Yeah, and focusing on overall dietary patterns rather than individual ingredients serves you far better than trying to memorise the list of things to avoid.
So that's why we fear everyday ingredients, and why understanding the actual science can free you from your anxiety that isn't serving your health anyway. That's it for this week. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Join us as we're unpacking the science behind everyday questions each week. Tell us in the comments what you'd like us to explore. Thanks for geeking out with us. But for now, that's it from me.
That's it from me.
And that's it from me.
Bye for now.